Welcome to Soul of Travel, Women's Wisdom and Mindful Travel. I'm your host, Christine Weinbrenner-Eyrich. Each week, you'll hear me having soulful conversations with women who are tourism professionals, trailblazers, and community leaders around the world. They share their personal and professional journeys to inspire you, and their stories teach you how to become a more conscious traveler, live life aligned with your values, and create a positive impact. We are thought leaders, action takers, and heart-centered change makers, and this is the soul of travel. Mia Taylor is a California resident, a lifelong avid traveler, and an award-winning journalist who has worked as a staff writer for some of the country's and world's top publications, including BBC, Parents, Real Simple, Better Homes and Gardens, Fortune, and other major publications. Her work has also appeared in Travel and Leisure, U.S. News and World Report, SF Gate, Westways Magazine, the Boston Globe, and TravelPulse. Mia has an MA in Journalism and Media Studies and was a member of a team of reporters who received the 2011 Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Journalism. She is also the recipient of 9 travel writing awards from the North America Travel Journalists Association. The awards recognize Mia's coverage of sustainable travel and wildlife conservation, including a gold award for her reporting on cruelty to elephants in the travel industry. Mia regularly appears on podcasts, radio shows, and television to discuss trending travel topics. She has been a guest multiple times on RM World Travel and has also appeared on the Weather Channel, among other broadcasts. In our conversation, Mia and I talk about some of her areas of focus: sustainability, wildlife conservation, and family travel. She talks about her decision to fly less, why that is important to her, and what she considers when she chooses to take that flight. She also shares about her journey to understanding animal cruelty in tourism and how we can support change. I talked to her about one of my favorite projects, the Most Influential Women in Travel list, curated by TravelPulse. And lastly, she talks a bit about juggling her personal and professional demands while focusing on her personal well-being. Join me now for my soulful conversation with Mia Taylor. Welcome to Soul of Travel podcast. I'm your host, Christine, and today I'm really excited to have a conversation with Mia Taylor, who is someone that I really admire in the industry for the way that she has been celebrating voices of women over the past few years. And so it's really exciting for me to get to connect with you face to face instead of email to email and hear a little bit more about your story. So welcome to the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for our chat.
Thank you. Well, as we begin, I'll just turn it over to you, Mia, to introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do in the travel industry.
Sure. So I've been a travel writer for about 15 years now. I started at the street as a luxury travel writer. And during the course of my journey as a travel writer, I sort of veered away from luxury travel and became more and more interested in sustainable travel and wildlife conservation as I explored the world a little more and sort of got a hand view of what was going on in the world. And so now, over the course of my decade or more in travel, I really focus on sustainable travel every chance I get. Whenever I can write about it or feature someone who's championing the issue, or find a new angle that needs to be showcased, that's a top priority for me. I'm also a mom now to an 11-year-old. And, one of the reasons I became a travel writer, and I've written about this in the past, was because my mother started with me when I was very young traveling. And that really informed the person I grew up to be and my view of the world. And so with my own son, it's been a priority. So he has been to many countries already. I am amazed by the person he's growing into, and I intend to continue that as a parent. But I also try to model for him sustainable travel and thoughtful travel and slow travel. So all of that is who I am, and it's what I bring to my writing every day.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I really do appreciate it, because I think it's as important as ever to continue to bring this conversation to the table and to as many audience as possible in as many formats as possible. So I think that it's really, it's just really great whenever you see someone who has shared values and you're cheering them on as well, because this is obviously something that's important to all of us and it's critical to all of us. And so I just think, um, as opposed to earlier in my career where sometimes I felt like it was a solo battle or there was really few of us, standing
Yeah.
side by side. Now it feels very different. And, even now we're just about to step into climate week. And that that has been something really incredible to see the tourism industries being a part of that and a part of that conversation in a big way. And so I think it's much more front of mind. And I think the conversation level has so much more depth and complexity than it has in the past. That's exciting to be a part of that.
I agree. I agree. I do, though, think that after the pandemic, we were really focused on it as things started to ramp back up. And I was just having a conversation with one of my editors a week or two ago about, over tourism is a huge problem again. And we seem to have forgotten some of the lessons, at least, that we learned as a result of the pandemic. We're facing a lot of those very same issues that we faced right before the pandemic. So I hope that as time goes on, we don't forget all those good conversations that I remember seeing on LinkedIn and in many conferences in the months and weeks after the pandemic sort of faded into the background.
I agree. It reminds me of an article, and now I hope I'm not going to tell you about your own article because I was reading some of your stuff and I was reading other things as I always am,
Yeah,
but about kind of the oversaturation of consumers of information about sustainability and
right.
responsible travel and
Yeah,
kind of that, like, one, it's just they've heard so much about it that they're turning it out kind of, and two, it's like a shut off because it feels like too much responsibility. I don't
yeah.
know,
Oh,
what
that was me.
your thoughts are. Was it yours?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah. No, it's actually good. It's a good talking point because I do feel like, that is a very important discussion to have right now, which is I think people are being bombarded right now with climate change and dread and disaster and sustainable travel and like all those things over and over and over again because we feel like in the industry we have to tell people you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. But for the rank and file person, I think it is a lot to synthesize and navigate. And I know I book most of my own travel as a travel writer when I'm not on press trips and things. And even I have to like really search long and hard for like what's the best hotel, what's the best mode of transportation. So if you're not in the industry or passionate about it, I can see how it's easy to just go to Expedia, book your hotel, and hit the ground running.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that'll be really important for us to be thinking about as businesses, because I think the other thing that happens from a brand perspective and a tour operator perspective is now, like, we used to have a conversation that says you should be doing, bringing sustainability into your business, but it should be subtle and baked in and nobody should know it's happening.
Yeah.
And then it was, it has to happen. We should be more transparent. Then it was kind of like, it's all you should talk about and you should
Right.
really put that in front of everybody. And so now it's almost
Come full
like,
circle.
yeah, do we go back to it just is, which I think is really the ultimate goal, right? It just
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
travel is sustainable. That would be
Ultimate
the
goal.
goal.
I
Um,
think that's a really good point. I was at a We Travel conference last week about innovation in travel, and exactly what you just said. Some of the leading travel tour operators in the world were there and talking about sustainable by design. And one of them, I forget who it was on the panel, said, "You can't pound your clients over the head with." This trip is going to be sustainable. You have to say, this trip is going to be amazing. And oh, it'll also be sustainable.
Woohoo. Yeah, I think it's so interesting when you look at the subtleties in language and how it resonates and how important it is. And then I also know, like, some of my ideal clients, they are going to see on my website that I have trips that focus on social impact and supporting women. And so then, like, they're saying yes to it because that is what's important to them. So I feel like you, at this point in time, really just have to understand who you're speaking to,
Totally.
why they're coming to you, and hopefully be putting the sustainability into your business practices,
Yeah.
whether it's on your homepage or not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was actually Christina Beckman, who's head of Tomorrow's Air. I was interviewing her for a story, and she also echoed these sentiments that you and I are sharing right now, which is ultimately, it can't always be the traveler's responsibility that the airlines have to start doing this. We can't always expect the traveler to hunt down the best way to do things. It's got to become part of the process. And even if that means you pay a little more for it, that's part of the process in the same way you pay a little more for organic food or
Mhm.
things like that.
Yeah, I agree. Like it is very hard as a consumer to find that. And like you mentioned, even when you are someone who's savvy or understands what you're looking for, it still can be difficult. So the easier the industry makes it
Yeah,
for people to, if it's the only thing on offer, it's the only thing chosen. And
totally.
so I think we obviously have a long way to go, but there's so many people making great strides. And I'm so glad you mentioned Christina Beckman because she's someone who's definitely
Yes.
in the forefront of making those great strides. And my listeners, if you haven't heard my conversation with her, you can go back, I think maybe 2 or 3 episodes or seasons, but you can hear that. And I'll try to link it in the show notes as well. One of the other articles of yours that I read or a post on LinkedIn that you were talking about flying less. So you just mentioned like
Yes.
when you are looking for flights, you're trying to find the most sustainable options and hotels and all those choices. Um, but if you're making a choice to fly less, um, I know that's a huge conversation. I've talked with other journalists and tourism professionals, and even in my own life, have been trying to figure out how to be more conscious with when I'm choosing to fly, which can be really difficult because, as you know, especially this month or October, I feel like every association has a conference. There's all these things. There's the climate week, which I have had planned to go to, and then I was like, I'm flying all the way to New York for this 1 day event for the particular conference I wanted to go to and going to be in and out and I'm like that actually feels so counterproductive
Right.
to why I wish to be there that I actually
Mm.
chose that I couldn't do that this
Okay.
year.
Okay.
But I'd love to hear what some of your thought processes are about that and what you weigh when you're looking at these
Yeah,
options.
yeah. It's a tough one because, both you and I come from, I think, the same place, which is we love to explore the world and experience cultures and connect with people. And so, in order to do that, you have to get there somehow. Um, but I think, as I mentioned in that article, while all of that is still important to me, what I'm trying to do are sort of is a two-pronged thing. For work, if I'm invited on a press trip, and like I said in the article I wrote about this, as all journalists are, you're invited to dozens of press trips a month and hundreds a year. So I look for 2 or 3 things in those press trips. I look for, does this tie into my core values, which are sustainability and wildlife conservation and also family travel. If it doesn't tie into one of those 3 things, that's almost an instant reason for me to say no unless I'm required to go on this trip by work. If it does, then I look at, well, how long is this trip? Am I going to be there for a day, like you mentioned for the conference? Or is this 4 or 5 days? So I'm not just jetting in and out and using having a big impact on the planet for a day. And I won't say yes anymore to these 1 or 2 day press trips. I just think that it's incumbent upon those who are planning trips as well as it is on me to be more thoughtful about how you plan trips. So I think the PR people of the world and the DMOs of the world have got to plan these more thoughtful trips. And then if I can, I extend the trip. If I can bring my son, if we can spend a couple extra days there, if it becomes a more meaningful thing overall, that's, bonus icing on the cake. But I'm also trying to set measurable goals for myself where we take 2 sort of big trips as a family each year, one in the summer and one on spring break. And then as a travel writer, keep it to like 3-ish or so that at, 5 trips a year. And, I think you and I were chatting about this earlier, but for some people, 5 trips is a lot a year, but for other people in our industry, that's nothing. So I'm still navigating this and I'm trying to find the right balance for me and my job and my family. And all of that, but I really do feel like I take a lot of time and think about, you know, is this going to be worth it? And on personal trips, the one other thing I'll add quickly is that, like this summer, we went to Sicily and we spent a month there. And I did that because I want to make the most of that impact I'm having on the planet. And that's part of the whole slow travel trend that there's been a lot of articles about. But that really resonated with me when I read about that. You know, if you're going to go, make it last, make it worth it. And so that's what I'm doing with all my trips now on a personal basis is we're going to spend at least 3 weeks. We're going to go to Japan this summer. We're going to spend 3 weeks there. I'm not going to fly all that way just to spend a week there.
Yeah, I think that those are really important considerations. And I know not all of us have the luxury of adding that extra time or, with our own personal travels. But I just think the more conscious you are about it. And maybe if you're going for a week, maybe you stay a week in one town and then you don't also spend time, moving to all these different places. Like there's all these different ways. It's like, what's, I guess, one step better? Like, how could I just make one level of more conscious travel
Yeah,
decision
I'm
about
glad
this
you brought that
experience.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's an important point. You're right. Not everybody can spend 3 weeks. I work remotely, so I can, like, work from destinations and stuff, but it's really important. Not everybody has the time or the resources to spend 3 weeks, so there are things you can do, like you said, which are really important, which is stay in one place when you're there rather than inter-country flights, zigzagging all over the country, hitting all the boxes while you're there, explore one place more deeply is a really good point.
Yeah, and one thing too that I've been playing with in the idea of, you mentioned making the travel experience itself more meaningful.
Mhm.
I have been studying Ayurvedic medicine, which,
Wow.
talks a lot about your personal constitution and the things that actually are good for who you are.
Yeah,
And I was kind of playing with that in the idea of travel and then also the idea of a lot of times people either look to travel for escape or travel for healing or, whatever the catalyst is for that. But my thought was, you know, you're often thinking about that travel choice as where you're going and not why you're going.
right.
So even if you need healing or you need retreat or you need um adventure, whatever it is that you're looking for, if you're thinking about the where over the why, you might not get it and it leaves that same sense of lack that you tried
Mhm,
to feel with travel,
mhm.
and then you are going to be left seeking. So then you're going to be taking another trip to fill the same hole.
Right.
And so I think getting really conscious about why you're traveling also will really help it to be more meaningful and then actually more sustainable because you're not using travel as this way to like scratch the itch. Like you actually know what you're after and you're more likely to get it. So that's kind of taking all my years of professional tourism career and adding it to my wellness and, like, trying to think about it from a different place, but I think that that's maybe something that we really need to be thinking about because even travel is becoming more expensive or returning to the level of expense it was that we've forgotten, however you look at that,
Yeah,
and it's not as easy to just take these quick getaways as
yeah.
well or to afford them. So I think we really do just need to be thinking about why you're traveling. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
I do. I think that's an excellent point too. And again, at the We Travel Innovation Summit last week, one of the speakers, I think it was Rob Holmes, brought that up, which is, we need to educate travelers about how they think about travel and like you said, why are they traveling? And if you're traveling to have meaningful time with your family, and that's what's driving you to get on that plane and go to that place, you don't need to zigzag all over a country once you get there to do that, and you don't need to go to the Barcelonas. You can go to second tier cities that are less over touristed or over, traveled and still have that quality vacation time with your family. So it's really about bringing it back to the traveler and having them think more deeply about what is the purpose of this trip. And
mhm.
multi-gen travel is big right now, and I think it's big right now because people do want that quality time together while exploring another country. But you don't have to go to Barcelona, or you don't have to go to Venice. You could go to Puglia and somewhere else, and still have that same Italian experience slowly and with less impact.
Yeah, that's so crazy, right? As you said the word Puglia, I was
Yeah.
literally imagining this time that I spent with my family there, and as you said it, it just gave me such chills 'cause, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking one of the most kind of memorable experiences that we had was we were near Ostuni, and we were in this little house that we rented kind of even far out of that city,
Oh, wow.
and, my kids loved it so much because it was a house with a pool, which will always be a win for children, right? But and stray cats that we were feeding, but here's the thing is we hardly ever left it.
Right.
And we almost assimilated into the space that we were. Like we went in and bought our groceries and we cooked our food and we fed the cats and we went for walks in the neighborhood. And
That is the best form of travel in my mind.
yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. They loved it so
Yeah.
much. Like, that's they always are like, "Remember the place where we had cats?" Like they were theirs, you know?
Yes.
Um, and I think we get so caught up by the way that we have currently been taught to think about travel, which I love that Rob shared about this is, like, redefining how you think about it. We have been told this is what travel looks like and feels like and should be for a very long time. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, but like I think it's even more important for ourselves now to have these really deep connective experiences. There's so much in our world that is isolating and disconnecting. And so going somewhere else is great because it is so, it changes who you are and how you see the world.
Yes.
But just being there
Yeah.
without being so busy and frenetic. Like you said, if you wanna connect with your family, it's so hard to do that when you're in the car for 8 hours and then, like, standing in line to enter some really busy museum, and you could have these really beautiful experiences further away. And I would love to talk about second-tier cities. I know you also recently, were writing about over tourism and what that looks like right now, which we're seeing just this peak of understanding, I guess, or re-understanding what it is. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's such an important topic, and, again, on that one, Rob hit the nail on the head, which is, you not all destinations are gonna have the same, way to deal with over tourism. And not all destinations are gonna wanna spread out over tourism through the shoulder seasons to make summer easier on those destinations. So, over tourism is a really complex problem, and it's on the rise again across the world because we all are wanting to travel as much as possible in the post-pandemic world, and there's been all kinds of headlines, this past 6 months to year, I wanna say, from Venice to Barcelona, and them announcing different measures like increased tourism taxes and limiting group sizes and no loudspeakers in Venice. And, I look at all of that and I think, why don't we just go somewhere else for a while? Or, just not for a while, but why do we all have to go to Venice? Why do we all have to go to Barcelona when this summer my family we went to Sicily and we went to so many second tier cities and we were in Artesia and I would go out for walks and there was no one else on the street, no one. And it was a beautiful experience. And so we still had an Italian experience. We still, enjoyed being in Italy, but we didn't go to Venice or Rome or Florence. So my thoughts about that are there are so many wonderful second tier for people who may not know, or just cities that aren't as popular yet, or their infrastructure for tourism may not be as developed, but they're beautiful places where you can have that deeper connection with locals. And they need the tourism dollars, so why not help support those second tier cities? And there's so many travel advisors who can and point you in the direction of those places if you're not sure what a second tier city is or which one to pick. There's lots of experts out there who can get you there, but it's a really great way to spread the support around the world of your travel dollars and have a more meaningful and peaceful experience.
Yeah, and I think, as you just mentioned, spreading the economic benefit, I think that's a really huge thing too, that if you're looking at how you can just make one easy choice, that is something that is really impactful. And honestly, I ended up traveling last summer with my girls in Europe. We had a dance camp my daughter was going to, and I had a conference. And so we kind of like wove things together, which had us being in Europe in the summer. It was my first time being in many of those places in the world. Um, it was, and not just this one that just ended, I'm sorry, a year ago.
Yeah.
But for me, it was so eye-opening after having these conversations about, the height of travel in Europe in the summer, or what does this look like and feel like, and to be walking through it like a living textbook in some ways. I had to navigate a lot. I had to navigate a lot. Like, the emotional things that I felt, the guilt I felt for, like, being a burden to a place that I felt like didn't need to be hosting me in that moment, to really wanting to show my children some of these things that they had learned about and were excited to see, to having really powerful conversations with them. I remember we were in Greece for a month, and we were really staying in places that there were not a lot of other travelers, but to fly out, we went to Santorini for 3 days. And the difference between where we were in Santorini was obviously very noticeable. We were probably headed in, it was about this time last year, so kind of on the edge of shoulder season there, but
Mhm.
still very busy. And I remember one of my daughters, when we were in this line, just walking through one of the narrow, sidewalks to
Yep.
get from one part of the island to another, and with like just hundreds of people
Yeah.
walking through these sidewalks. And then one of my daughters looked at me and she's like, they keep saying that the tourist season is almost over. It's almost over. It's almost over. What are these people going to do when everyone leaves? They're all here serving tourists. How
Yeah.
do they have jobs? What do they do? I was like, wow, that is a
That's a very insightful question for a young person.
yeah, yeah. And I was like, that's such a good question. We should ask someone that question the next time we have the opportunity. Um, but just kind of going back to the lived experience of over tourism, like it was just such a profound way to understand what we're talking about. Like I normally avoid it, but I think in this moment it was really powerful for me to actually experience it so that I could have the context for the conversations. So I think
I'm curious what you told your children about, or your 2 daughters, about all the people that were there, and maybe did you talk to them about better ways to travel the world when they get older or anything?
yeah, I mean, we always have those
Yeah.
conversations. They're probably like, "Oh my gosh, mom, please stop talking about it."
Yeah,
But
same, I
but
see.
we do. And and I said, a lot of the people that are here in Santorini might go actually return to a different home on the mainland in Greece for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we had some of those conversations, but yeah, they really found on their own that when we were traveling, the times that we spent where we felt more a part of where we felt included, where we stayed in smaller venues, and like someone's grandma was making us fresh bread every morning and knew we were there, and we
yeah.
felt like we just really felt cared for, and we didn't feel they could feel the difference between feeling cared for and feeling like a burden.
Totally, yeah. I think,
And
and it's such a complex problem because another person on the panel last week said, "But everybody wants to at least see the Eiffel Tower once, and everybody wants to, go to Rome once and see the Colosseum once." And I don't blame them, I did too. So, this other person's suggestion was, if you're gonna do that later at night or earlier in the morning, less peak times of day, so you're not part of that burden. So that's another sort of thought for people who haven't had the opportunity yet to go to the Eiffel Tower or the Colosseum and don't wanna skip Machu Picchu altogether. Just think about, and it touches on your point of what are these people gonna do who are serving the tourist industry when the tourists are all gone? So for some destinations, spreading out the traveling through more of the year is a good solution for them because then they do have income longer into the year. That may not be the answer for every destination, but it is for some of them. So those are,
Uh-huh.
there's a couple of ways that travelers can think about over tourism. Go later in the morning, go earlier, and go later at night, earlier in the morning, or later in the year in October, November. One of my editors at Parents and Travel and Leisure, she travels a lot in November and December, which, aside from Christmas and Thanksgiving, are much quieter months of the year. And her son always has these amazing, meaningful interactions with locals that she tells me about.
Yeah. And I know, and I'm gonna have to email Rob after this and be like, okay, your ears must be burning because we just
Yeah,
keep talking about him.
yeah,
And for my listeners, I did interview him way back. I think he might have been my third conversation when I just first began to conceptualize solo travel. And I was speaking with people who I knew were doing great things in the industry to bring that to light during 2020, right after the pandemic began. But um, you kept saying, like, what is better for the destination? And I know one of his things was saying, yes, we talk about extending travel year round, but some destinations need to heal during the off season.
totally.
And I grew up in one of those destinations.
Mhm.
So when I read that, when you were sharing that
Yes.
thought, I was like, wow, yes, that is really important. So it's
Yeah.
such a wise, I think it's always the wise idea to ask communities what
That's
they want out
Yeah,
of tourism.
totally.
And I think that is a relatively new concept. I know there's some of us who have been talking about it for a long time, but for it to be a real part of the conversation that destinations don't exist for us to travel to them and we don't get to consume them at our whim,
Yeah,
which again is kind of this larger narrative that we've been a part of in travel for a really long time. And the idea that you should say, you know, gosh, I had noticed it's so busy when I've come here in July. What does it look like in November? Do you wish there were that many travelers here in November, or do you just like hunker down and read and, go hiking? Or,
yeah.
I think just really being honest about the fact that these places exist outside of travel, whether they're tourism hotspots or not, is super important.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that I didn't bring up myself, which is ask the locals, like, "Do you want travelers here in November or December?" Like, they're key to any solution. Obviously, it's their home. So, um, if we're talking about all stakeholders being at the table for these solutions, I mean, the conversation's really gotta be driven by the locals, not us. So that's a
Mhm.
really important point.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to start. And again, as I witnessed that as a child, I knew, like, come like Labor Day, I was like, oh, we get maybe 2 weeks at our lake
Yeah,
before it'll start to get too cold to swim there.
yeah,
Or, 2 weeks where we can eat at the local hot spots without having to fight the weekend people or the lake people for,
totally.
and it's just, I think that might be really where the idea of maybe more conscious travel came from for me, is because I felt so impacted by it and I just questioned whether that was reasonable. And I think I just never stopped questioning. Like, I always like wanted to come at it from the perspective of the place and the people
Right.
who are experiencing the travelers and not just the experience of a traveler.
I live in San Diego, so it's not a small town that's impacted by travel, but I will say that every year I say to my son and my friends, like, I can't wait till October, because October is sort of when people don't think of coming to San Diego as much. And for me, it's the most beautiful month at the beaches here because the beaches are quieter and the roads are quieter. And I mean, it's spread out over a much bigger geographic area here in San Diego. But I really do understand for smaller places how that impact can be felt even more deeply.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I mentioned as I was introducing you is the way that you've been really supporting women in the industry, how important that is to me. I was super honored to be included in your list of most influential women in travel that you published with TravelPulse 2 years ago. I know you did another list last year, which was the most, I think it was the highlight of my entire year,
Oh,
at the beginning of this year when you said you just put an email on LinkedIn. You're like, "I'm gonna do this
yeah.
again. Is there anyone that you would recommend or who you think needs to be celebrated for their work?" And the outpouring
Yes.
of
Right.
people. It was I mean, it was
Yeah.
just I was like, "This is what I'm here for."
Yeah.
This was incredible, and everybody was just celebrating each other, and then, like, someone would write a name and someone else would be like, "Yes, they're
Mhm.
absolutely incredible,
Yep.
and that reminds me of this person," and it was such a really powerful experience, but I would love to hear from you a little bit about how this idea emerged,
Right.
your experience curating this, and then maybe a few standout people that you learned about that maybe you didn't know before you began writing this.
Sure. And I do wanna comment on that whole LinkedIn phenomenon that we had there. I thought that was so heartwarming because you often hear about, I don't know, women not supporting other women or just those tropes about, stabbing each other in the back, whatever it is, But in that instance, in that moment with that LinkedIn post, like women were really raising each other up. And that was such a nice feeling to see. And the previous year when I had curated the list, I don't recall if I put a LinkedIn post out. Maybe I did then, but for whatever reason, this year, this most recent list was just so many more people responded, and we had a hard time narrowing it down. But to get back to your initial question, which is, I actually was handed this project. I think a writer before me came up with the idea, if I recall, but it wasn't as well developed. So I was asked to take it over. So I put my fingerprints on it in ways that are speak to me, and by calling out for women who are doing things in sustainability and DEI and things that I think are, whenever we sort of break down who the winners are each year, I look for those people who are really addressing the most important pressing needs facing the planet right now. So that's how I brought my own personal touch to it, because I do think, and I write this in the intro every year, that the planet is at such a critical juncture, that we need innovators, and we need to raise those innovators up and show the world what they're doing to show that you can make a difference, it can be done, and here's some of the creative ways that people are tackling what's going on with the planet. But most importantly, above all that, it's women. And like for me, I love reading the submissions every year because it's so inspiring, and it just makes me want to be a better person and do better each year. And I'm so proud of women for leading the way in so many unique ways. My mind is always blown every year when I see the things that women are doing in their corners of the world. And so, I'm thinking of people like this year on the list, Lauren Bates. She's the founder of Wild Terrains, and she was somebody I didn't know anything about. She was nominated, by somebody on LinkedIn. But I'm just gonna, she started a certified B corporation, and Wild Terrain caters exclusively to women travelers and focuses on supporting women-owned businesses in destination and telling a story about that destination and opening up conversations within the destination with those travelers. I would have never thought of that, and I just thought that's a really great way. Not only is she a women-owned business, she's supporting women-owned businesses and destinations, and she's helping women to have more meaningful connections when they travel. Um, so there was so many layers to what she's doing that I just thought, wow, she's wonderful. Olivia Cryer, who's the co-founder of the Conscious Travel Foundation, along with her best friend Maudie Tomlinson, another wonderful concept that I hadn't thought of, but they are a nonprofit organization, or they created a nonprofit organization that collaborates, educates, and advocates for more positive, sustainable travel. Again, key issue facing the world. And they also support grassroots projects on the ground. So they're trying to have an impact on many levels. And I just think people like that who are really, because it can be exhausting. We all get tired and we all start to feel like, I'm not making a difference being a vegan. I'm not making a difference not flying as much if it's just me. But every little thing that one of us does adds up, and we start to have a collective impact. And these women aren't getting exhausted, and they're devoting their entire day, waking hours, career to these things. Christina Beckman, head of Tomorrow's Air, is another one who I was on this year's list and I admire immensely because she is tackling an issue that I lay awake at night thinking about, which is carbon emissions and how to deal with that. Stephanie Jones, who's the founder of Cultural Heritage Economic Alliance, is tackling DEI in travel and how to shine the light on Black-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses, another really important issue right now. So, just rattling off some of these things, you can see that women are really thinking about everything and they're
Wow.
tackling everything. And so this list is an honor and a privilege to do.
Hi, it's Christine, jumping in here for just a moment to invite you, my community of listeners, to join me to celebrate a milestone coming up here at Soul of Travel Podcast. This fall, we will hit 200 episodes. And to honor this, I'm hosting a virtual gathering on November 14th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Mountain Time for past guests, listeners, patrons, and sponsors. I cannot wait to have you all together to be a part of this accomplishment. I wouldn't be here without all of you. To get your invitation, please visit www.souloftravelpodcast.com/events. Again, that's souloftravelpodcast.com/events, or you can go to the footer on the website and select the events option. I can't wait to see you and celebrate then. Now, let's get back to our soulful conversation.
Yeah, and thank you again. Because it's so aligned with my heart, like when I see it, it's just such a treasure. And many of those women are people that I know and admire. And so for me, this podcast, that's what it's about, is shining a light on women and the innovation and the impact we can have. And I think the other thing is when you create a list like that, or when I look at my podcast page and all the faces next to each other, like there's something about how it might feel to be one person doing one thing, focusing on one area. But when you see yourself in a group like that, whether they're people you know directly or not, you think, oh my gosh, we are doing this thing that we're setting out to do, right? And I don't actually have to do every part of it, because look at all these people who are alongside me. Again, whether that's indirectly or directly, we're creating the impact that we want to create. We're doing the thing that makes our soul feel alive. We're doing these things that energize us, and the collective spirit of it, I think, is maybe the most important thing.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that, seeing sort of all the headshots of these women and all the things that they've dedicated themselves makes you feel like you're part of this greater good, because that's really important to keep you motivated and keep you going. So I'm glad it's received that way. And I do think that it's one of the most important things we do at Travel Pulse each year, to let women know that their work is appreciated, it's recognized, and it's really important.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the other topics that's really important to you is conservation and animal welfare in travel. And you wrote a few pieces about elephants in tourism back in 2019. I would love to hear from you a little bit about maybe if there was an experience that was a catalyst for that awareness, and then also what you think the landscape looks like now and what steps we are being successful at and maybe not being successful at towards removing animal cruelty from tourism.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I was in my 20s, I went to Thailand and I did what everybody does when they go to, well, not everybody, but back then, what a lot of people did is you take an elephant ride on the back of an elephant because you think that's cool, what they do in Thailand, or it's fun, or it's traditional, or, it's what you've seen in postcards and pictures. And then I became a travel writer later. And I think I got a press release from Intrepid that perhaps the light bulb went off, and it was Intrepid had decided, and I admire Intrepid Travel immensely. Let me just say that, but they had decided to no longer support operators that offered tour rides on elephants. And I started digging into why did they make that decision, and what's that all about? And you can't unlearn the horrifying things that learned as I started digging in about Fajan, which many people are not aware of. I know I have friends who went to Thailand recently and did the elephant ride innocently, like I did 20 years ago. So Fajan means crushing an elephant's spirit. Um, and that the way mahouts do that is they separate a baby elephant from the mother. They bind its front and back legs, put it in a very small enclosure so it can't turn around, and then they drive spikes into the elephant's foot and into its head, and all sorts of torture with the goal of crushing that elephant's spirit so that it will be submissive for a lifetime of supporting tourism activities. And just reading that stuff the first time I read the reports, there's lots of investigations into it, made me physically ill. And I thought I could never be part of that again. But not only could I never be part of that again, I need to spread the word about it because I was so upset about it. So I actually first started writing about it in 2016 when I was a luxury writer at the street, travel writer. And then I wrote about it again at TravelPulse when I came here. And I write about it whenever I get the chance to write about it because, to your second question, some change has taken place over the decade almost, but not enough. Those elephant rides are still being offered, and countless tourists are still taking those elephant rides. And I think it was maybe a year after the pandemic ended, there was all kinds of reports of, because now climate change is a bigger thing. Elephants are being ridden in the excessive heat, and on the trails, they're collapsing. So not only are they being tortured by Fajan, but they're collapsing in, unbearable heat, and they don't have water and they don't have food. So anyway, to sum it all up, if you're able to touch or ride an elephant, that elephant has gone through a submissive breaking process. And World Animal Protection, which is a global nonprofit, not everybody agrees with their sort of aggressive tactics to raise awareness about these issues, but I really admire the work that they do. They've been really trying to help create sanctuaries in Asia, throughout Asia, for elephants where you don't touch them, and they're true sanctuaries. So I think the bottom line is that we've made some progress, but there's a lot more progress to be made. And travelers, if they can, should really educate themselves before they engage in any activity involving um, animals, wild animals. If you're taking a selfie with an animal at a facility, that animal has been drugged so that it doesn't attack you. And I don't visit facilities like that anymore. My best experience was I went to Kenya with the Big Life Foundation. And if you want to experience animals in Africa, do things like this. I went with Intrepid Travel. They offered a trip with Big Life Foundation, which is a nonprofit based in East Africa. And they let us walk day after day with the people who are charged with protecting elephants. And so every morning we'd wake up and we'd go out and we'd walk with them, and we'd help them gather their photo traps and see where the rhinos were. And we would see the elephants this way, a natural way where we're not riding them or even, asking them to be in a zoo or forcing them to be in a zoo, not asking. So I'm really passionate about it. I could go on, I could do a whole show about this, but I just think it's incumbent upon us as a civilization to not, animals are not there for our entertainment. And I saw a post recently that said that my children are not going to know, or the next generation of children are not going to know what it's like to see, a lot of these animals in the wild anymore because there's so few of them left on the planet. And that just really broke my heart.
Yeah, as you said, this could probably be its um, own conversation, but I think it's one of these moments. There's been so many guests that I've talked to, specifically with elephants in Thailand, that this was like kind of the first experience that they had or reflected upon or thing they learned about that actually allowed them to begin to question other things within their own travel experiences. Because I guess it's such a universal experience. I mean, there's so many of us who have traveled, whether it was elephants or, often places it's birds or monkeys, or like you said, I was somewhere in Kenya, and they had a cheetah that you could go into its cage with it and take a picture, which I was like, the scene's in crazy, but everybody was with was like, yeah, this is what you have to do. And I remember just like walking in there thinking, this is so bizarre, but it's happening so fast, and I don't want to offend the person who was like, "This is a real treat that you get to do this," and I was like, "It is a real treat," and, like, I was like, "Okay, I'll do this thing that you're so happy to, like, tell me I get the privilege of doing, and then afterward, like, that initial thing that told me, like, "This can't be okay," like, just kind of nod at me, and it did. It had me asking more questions, like, "How did this happen? Why did this happen? It's clearly not safe for the animal. Is it safe for the handlers? Is, other kids that are going in there with a wild animal?" And, it's such a complex thing
Then
to think about, and then, there's all of the ideas of that it's, maybe socially acceptable in the country that it's
yeah,
happening in, so then you're going in and you're using your outside views to tell them
right.
this isn't socially acceptable, and so then that is a real
Mhm.
complex,
It is.
and difficult conversation, and, our worldview doesn't have to be everyone's worldview, and
Right.
so,
Yeah.
um, I feel like I really appreciate when people are vulnerable enough to look at their own experiences
Yeah.
and question, and then also to help tell these stories to ask
Yeah.
more questions,
It is,
right?
yeah, it's so complex. And I'm glad you said, what you did about it. It's our worldview being imposed on that country, and that's not always okay, and so it's as complex as over tourism, if not more complex of an issue, because as you learn more about the elephants, again, for instance, if these elephants are not in these facilities where tourists can ride them, and they're let go, where do they go? What happens to the mahout whose livelihood is based on this job? So you can't just tell these countries stop offering elephant rides. You have to find a sustainable alternative, and that's why I admire sort of World Animal Protection and some other organizations that are doing similar things, because they're not just saying don't offer these rides and you won't have this living a way to make a living. They're saying here's an alternative and we're going to help you come in and set up this alternative, and that way you can sort of transition from one model to another, and not just bare bones, here you can't do this and figure it out on your own.
Mhm.
So there has to be a conversation, and again it goes back to sort of the same solutions as over tourism. The locals have to be involved, they have to lead the way, and there has to be this sort of mutual dialogue.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting, or I guess I wonder, I know that I specifically got into tourism because of my, passion's not quite the right word, but this idea of social justice and social impact. Like, I have a degree in sociology, and then somehow tourism fell into my realm, and then I just kept trying to shove those 2 things together,
Mhm.
and so I think many of us maybe entered the tourism industry without the realization that we would be a part of some of the most difficult conversations that are gonna be happening in our lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, we're talking about DEI, we're talking about, power dynamics, we're talking about, um, water access, we're
Mhm.
talking like, all of these things end up in our realm,
Yeah.
um, whether you attended to be a part of that conversation or not. In
Yeah.
travel, I think we're really realizing that we are kind of on the front lines of this because
Yeah.
we are walking through the world in
Yeah.
our businesses,
Yeah.
and we can be great advocates for change and agents of change, and um yeah, I just think I often wonder, I'm like, did the person that took the job as the marketing director for whatever travel company realize that they were now going to be shaping their brand's narrative around DEI?
Yeah. It's a weighty, weighty industry to be in right now, and I love the way you expressed it, which is walking through the world. I mean, I do think that's a really, important point, that we are sort of out there in the world, and how we handle ourselves and how we show up and how we teach future generations or even current travelers how to show up is so important. I mean, we all have to be so conscious of, like, the role models that we are, and walk the walk.
Mhm. Yeah, obviously, I really agree with that because I think it's so important, but I love spaces and conversations like this, and being able to talk with someone like you to
Mm.
just, um, like put it out there, right? Sometimes it's hard, but also you learn so much.
Mhm.
And for me, that's like my number one personal value is learning and growth. And so I think it's okay. And I think the other thing that comes into this, when we're talking about any of these topics we've talked about so far, is the idea to know that you didn't know better before.
Right.
And it's okay to excuse past choices before you had the information that you have now.
Yeah.
But much like you said, when you learned about the treatment of animals in Thailand, like you can't ever unknow the
Right.
information. So it's what you do with it once you have learned.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, this isn't about shaming anyone. I felt terrible when I learned about how I participated in that process, but then I turned that around and, tried to be part of the solution. And we can all try to be to grow and be part of the solution in our own way moving forward rather than dwelling on, well, I feel guilty about this, try to be part of the change moving forward and be an advocate for, what you've learned.
Mhm. I know one of the last things, and we just have a few more minutes left,
Mhm.
but that you write a lot about is parenting. We've talked a
Mhm.
little bit about the importance of traveling with our children, what that creates in their lives. But I also wanted to talk to you about another topic that comes up a lot here on the podcast is this idea of work-life balance.
Mm.
And you and I have had talked yesterday about the idea that we're like, there's no balance. There is simply like juggling and moving like three balls from
Right.
here to there. And
Totally.
like how that looks in your life and how you bring career, parenting, and even just well-being, which is something, if I'm honest, holy cow, I'm in the middle of a real juggle between these things and ensuring that well-being still happens.
Yeah.
Um, what does that look like for you? And maybe what wisdom do you have to share from your
That is such
experience?
important question in my life. So, in full transparency, I've had breast cancer twice. I just had it again in October. So, well-being and balance is more important to me every day right now than it has ever been in my life. And I'm a single mom. So my days are crazy. I have a primary client, TravelPulse, that I write for every several times a week, and I write for parents, and I write for SF Gate, and all these things. So my weeks are full of deadlines that I'm always juggling. Um, but what I've learned to do for me, and this may not work for everyone, is to say no. I've learned to not schedule meetings in the mornings, really early mornings anymore, because that's my time where I have to take care of my health and go for walks and meditate or whatever it is that I need to do for me. Um, and then I've also learned, and I wrote about this for parents recently, but I had started doing it on my own, how to help my son be more independent as he gets older, because then that alleviates some of the juggling that I have to do with career and the house and his things that he needs. And the story I was assigned is there's this sort of epidemic of parents who are like doing everything for their kids and overscheduling their kids. And, then the kids don't ever become very independent. So I think in my household, in order to function, my son has to be more independent, and he's starting to do that. But I really think that you have to learn to set boundaries in order to be able to juggle everything that you want to do as a woman and as a professional and as a mom and manage your days. No day is going to be perfect, and you just have to navigate that with grace and forgive yourself for the things that you do wrong or when you fall down or whatever. But um, I would also say with regard to family and travel that I think it's so important to take your children and explore the world with them. And I make that a priority every year in our household because it is so important to raise a world citizen who understands different cultures and ways of life and wants to be a part of the world and help the world.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing on both counts because I think it can be so difficult and overwhelming. And I think the grace is the most important thing, right? I mean, there's no way that we're getting the gold star at the end of every day as much as we wish that we could.
Yeah.
Like just letting that go is often sometimes so helpful. But I think for me too is realizing It's so easy as a parent and a business owner and someone with a lot of obligations to be self-sacrificing. Like, it's so easy to do it.
Yeah.
Um, it's almost impossible not to do it, in
Right.
fact. But we, I think, realize, and I'm sure you can relate, when your health topples, you realize that if you haven't cared for yourself, you're
Right.
caring for no one else.
Right.
And so I think for people listening, permission to prioritize yourself, whatever that looks like, if it's 30 minutes a day or starting with 5 minutes a day. I can't tell you how many times, like, I either get into my car and before I turn it on, I just sit with my eyes closed and
Yeah.
take like 5 breaths and just even remember that I'm in my own body before I go and spend like 3 hours picking up kids
Right.
and taking them to dance or whatever, that those little practices can help us, like, along this journey to create a little more balance.
Yeah, I agree. You have to because and I read somewhere along my most recent health scare, if you don't take care of your health now, you'll pay for it later. And that really was sort of one of those aha moments. Like looked back on the previous year for me and realized I was not taking care of my health. And I had a really stressful job at that time and an editor who was stressing me out beyond measure. And so if I paid the price for that. And, now I know, take care of yourself first because then you'll be here longer to take care of others.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mia, so much for this beautiful conversation. I feel like we've hit so many topics that I know that, again, that we have a lot of alignment
Yeah.
in what we're thinking about and talking about. Before we end our conversation, I always have a few rapid fire questions. So
Okay.
we'll take like this deep emotional moment and we'll move into the lightheartedness.
You bet.
The first is, what are you reading right now?
Oh, 2 weeks notice. It's about how to take control of your life and live the life you want.
Perfect. It sounds like it's perfect.
Yeah.
What is always in your suitcase or backpack when you travel?
I bring my own water bottles, so I'm a sustainable, aluminum water bottles. So I'm a sustainable traveler. In case I lose one, I have another one in my suitcase. And I also bring my own cutlery in case people try to give me plastic silverware and things like that.
Yeah. To sojourn means, to me, to travel somewhere as if you live there for a short while, akin to slow travel. Where would you still love to sojourn?
I would go back to Sicily, and I, I, I know I said I was there this summer, but I was so at peace there. It's such a wonderful place in terms of the food and the lifestyle. So that I felt like I was sojourning there, and I would do that every year for my personal wellness.
Well, thank you. What is something you eat that immediately connects you to a place you've been?
Oh, that's interesting. I guess locally caught food. I don't eat meat, but I do eat seafood now. So I would say the locally caught fresh fish.
Mhm. Who was a person that inspired you or encouraged you to set out and explore the world?
My mother. She, took me on cross-country trips in middle school, just her and I. She was my parents divorced early, and I thought she was so brave to just we would hit the open road, leave our house in New York, and go to all the parks, national parks in the Southwest, and she had a flat tire, she fixed it herself, that kind of inspiration, seeing a woman that, at that point in life, travel on her own with a child, set me off on the trajectory I followed.
Yeah, thank you. If you could take an adventure with one person, fictional or real, alive or past, who would it be?
Always my son. Always.
Yeah, I love that. Well, as you know, Soul of Travel is a place for celebrating women in the industry. Who is one woman that you would love to recognize in this space?
Oh gosh, I would just point you to my lists. I can't. Women are doing amazing things, and it's not fair to just pick one. I mean, it's not a. I just couldn't. There's so many good women out there doing great things. So
Yeah, thank you. I will make sure that I link those in the show notes because I agree there's so many great people to learn about. And I really, really, really appreciate your heart and your attention to curating that list and to sharing all of the things that you've shared with us today.
you bet. It's been a pleasure. It was a fun conversation.
Thank you.
conversations are bringing together people from around the world. If this sounds like your community, welcome. I'm so happy you are here. I am all about community and would love to connect. You can find me on Facebook at Soul of Travel Podcast or follow me on Instagram either at she.sojourns or at Soul of Travel Podcast. Stay up to date by joining the Soul of Travel Podcast mailing list. You'll also want to explore the Journey Woman community and its resources for women travelers over 50. I'd also like to share a quick thank you to my podcast producer and content magician, Carly Eduardo, CEO of Comprehende. I look forward to getting to know